Preston, do you want to tell our viewers, listeners, how this week has been for you so far?
Yeah, so I woke up about 15 minutes ago. I'm on nights, and I know like some people can flip their schedules really well. I'm not very good at that. So I've just been like sleeping piecemeal, like 2 hours here. I get up and do some things, and I sleep for another 2 hours and I go to the hospital. So basically every day feels like an overnight flight to Europe that like day after when you're just like jet lagged, but I'm just like living in this like perpetual soup where I don't see where one day ends and the other begins.
How long are your night shifts? Are they like 12 hours, 14 hours?
They end up being 12 most of the time.
Okay.
I get in around 8:45 to do sign out at 9, and then I'm supposed to sign out around 8 in the morning if I have like new patients to present. But then people come in and they like chit chat and complain about things, and I'm like, please, can I just present to you and
Let me
go
go
home?
home.
Like one time the other day, we were just the staff come in, they're just like complaining about how the AC is not working properly for like 30 minutes. And I was like, dude, for the love of God, I want to go back home. Let me present my patient and
Free
leave.
me. I feel like are there like times when you get to like chill for a bit, or is it like kind of like a really busy overnight service?
There are definitely times you get to chill. So the first night the unit was capped, so we couldn't admit anyone. We were on diversion. So if I got called, it was like for minor stuff, like, hey, this person needs like a new sleep medication, or they're complaining of pain or something. So I think I got called like twice that whole night. But
Oh, that's
then
good.
there have been nights this week where the phone rings like probably 15 or 16 times, which isn't like bad compared to surgery when they talk about like 40 times in a shift, 50 times, 100 times. But it's just like you don't get meaningful rest either when your schedule's all messed up because
Mhm.
it's about 20 every 20 minutes or so. And sometimes it's like, okay, now I have to go see this new console. It'll be another couple hours before I can like sit down again or something.
So, would you say that you've had to use your coping skills this week?
Yes.
Yes,
Um, all the time.
all the time.
It's like it's especially tough when you like just got to sleep around like 4 a.m. and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, this will be so nice. And then the phone rings at 4:30 and you're like, time to center myself and be like, like the phone rings and you're picking it up and you're like, I wish I could throw this thing through the wall. And then and
Yeah.
then you pull up to your head and you're like, hey, it's Preston with Psych.
Literally,
Oh, what's going on? Okay. Yeah, those can be really tough patients. Uh-huh.
those can be tough. Capacity consult, anyone?
Yeah,
Little 4:30
exactly.
a.m.
What if
capacity consult.
so she's not trying to leave. Just what if she
No.
thinks about if she wants to leave? Okay, yeah, that's really reasonable to be worried about that right now at this time. Let me come talk to
Let me just
you.
put you on hold for one
Yeah.
second.
Like let me put you on a brief hold.
Your cat's like, what the hell?
Okay, yeah, we'll be down in a moment.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And what a great opportunity for learning. That's what an awesome way. I'm gonna put the liaison in consult liaison psychiatry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a
Service
lot
with
of
a smile.
questions for this episode and then also in general for other episodes to talk about coping with being an intern or being on nights in residency. And so we today are going to talk about our favorite coping skills, and maybe favorite's the wrong word for Preston. Maybe it's just most useful coping skills this week. And we are going to do them in an order of, I'm going to say my favorite, like plan ahead or cope ahead skills, in the moment skills, and then post skills. And then Preston, you were going to talk about how you talk to patients about coping skills or coach them through
Mhm.
them today. What we're going to start with, and I'm nervous to start with, is a little miniature 3-minute mindfulness meditation. I'm mainly nervous. I'm afraid Preston's going to fall asleep during
I'm
this.
I'm already on like halfway there, so you just gotta
You
send me
just,
home.
I just gotta be like, and then I can take over this entire episode and tell
Well,
secrets.
you just have such a relaxing voice.
Thank you.
Your vocal cords are like little tranquilizers, and I'm just a
Wow,
zebra
though.
running around in the safari, waiting to be
Just
hit with a
hitting note
dart.
B52
Mhm.
sharp. Okay, so do you think we should do the mindfulness now or at the end of the episode?
Let's start with it because I think if it centers me, then maybe it could help me.
Okay,
lock in for
great.
this episode.
Are you going to trust me to guide you through it?
Yep, this is my social trust fall.
Okay, before we do it, tell me, have you done mindfulness before?
Yes.
What's like your experience level? Would you say like you've done it a handful of times in med school, you do it every day? Where are you at?
Handful of times in med school. I mean, if you couldn't tell, I'm usually the class clown in a lot of educational settings. So whenever we've done mindfulness, they want everyone to be quiet, you know?
Making a fart sound.
Yeah, no, for real. It's like, all right, guys, I want you to picture you're on the beach. And it's totally silence. I'm just like, and then everyone's
like, nailed
laughing,
it.
and the teacher's not taking it. She's like, "You're not taking it seriously." So, like, I think I was always a bit of a rebel about mindfulness because I was like, "This is lame. Like, I'm driven by a motor. I don't need to sit still." But
it's for
now,
nerds.
as I go further in my training, I see how important mindfulness is. So I'm a bit of an amateur with it. So I think before I was a skeptic, but now I'm a bit of an apologist.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm going to prompt you the way I prompt my patients when we do mindfulness for the first time. And this is for our listeners as well. So I always give people a timeline for like how long we're going to do it, because otherwise you can start it and it can be 60 seconds in and people will start panicking or having anxiety of like, how long is this going to be? Oh my God, how long has it been? Oh, where's my brain? So the first thing is it's going to be 3 minutes. The second part is the main point is to just be present and allow things to happen in your brain and try to come back to the present moment or sensation that I'm directing you towards. And the last part is there's no wrong way to do mindfulness. So try not to be super mean to yourself, which is usually the hardest part for a lot of people, is they start self-criticizing during it. So with all of that being said, we're going to do one of my favorites, but one of the many, many ways to practice mindfulness. So the first thing is I want you to sit back, chill for a second, even though you're run by a motor. We'll both sit back.
I'm sitting back.
I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to close my eyes, and you're just going to ground down your feet into the floor, into the chair, and take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out. Take another deep breath, and we'll start by just focusing on the sensation of the breath. And let it out. We'll take one more breath in. Preston, I'll kill you. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. We're going to have to re-fucking do that. This is supposed to be a resource for us.
Sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm relaxed.
I'm not laughing. Okay, you can lead us in mindfulness.
So I'm feeling my feet planted on the floor. I'm relaxing into the chair. Each breath I take pushes me a little bit farther into the chair. Just focus on the rhythm of your breathing. There's no wrong way to do it. Just learn that. Now I want you to start to survey your senses. So starting with your hearing, what are things you hear? I hear the drum, the air conditioner in the
Okay, we're not doing
background.
this. We're not doing this.
What?
You're not doing it right.
Okay, Margaret. Why don't you lead it again?
No, you ruined it. Now we just have to
Okay.
talk about it.
Okay.
You ruined it. You ruined the mindfulness moment. See, this is why this is why I don't lead things in this. So what drove you? Let's come back to that though. What drove you to do that?
I thought it would be really funny.
And some people probably laughed, not me, but some people
Yeah,
probably did.
and some people were probably pissed that I did that.
So what drove you to do that? Why did you need to be funny in that moment?
Probably because I was like starting to feel uncomfortable
Okay.
with
Was your brain
relaxing.
starting to kind of like race, or like you were
Yeah.
noticing boredom? and
Or
trouble
maybe it was
paying
like
attention?
the walls were starting to come down a little bit, and I was like, I didn't want to see what was on the other side of that.
Hmm.
So
What
I
do
was
you
like, oh, I
mean?
have to sit in this silence.
Ah,
This
silence is
is my
hard.
punishment is Margaret psychoanalyzing me for disrupting her
I
mindfulness
know
time.
this is actually what we like do with my patients is like what happened during the mindfulness. So if they don't make a fart noise, which I will say you're the first person in both doing this with patients and teaching it in like group fitness classes at the end, that you're the first person to ever do that during this. That's why I'm taken aback. But a big part of why mindfulness helps people is noticing what their brain does and what they're trying to avoid when they're trying to relax and focus on presence or being attentive to one thing. And so the reason I said to you that the when you were leading it, you were doing it not in a way I would recommend is we were going pretty fast and going through a bunch of different sensations. What we want to do is to focus on one sensation for a certain mindfulness
Mm,
activity. We can do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise. It's sort of mindfulness, but it's also kind of you're moving a lot, so you can't see what your mind is doing. Does that make sense? Like, you kind of have to
yeah.
stay with something that'll bore you to notice what your brain starts to do.
Actually, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I was afraid of boring people.
Oh, well, I might have bored you guys, sorry.
No, but, like, it's funny because that's the point of mindfulness, right? Is to, like,
Yeah,
let yourself experience boredom and then investigate how you're feeling about that boredom.
yeah,
And I was like, as I felt myself start to experience that boredom, I was like,
mhm,
"Oh my gosh, if I was in the car listening to this, I would be bored, and then
mm,
maybe I wouldn't care about the podcast anymore, so I need to do something funny to stay entertaining."
yeah.
So
You
that's
also got
so to
worried.
answer your question why I do, that's why I did it.
Yeah. Well, what's your experience like? So, my background with mindfulness is I actually took the, like, mindfulness-based stress reduction, like, course in college. That's, like, the 6 sessions or 8 sessions where you do a bunch of different practice techniques in a group of people.
Hmm,
And I hated it. I signed up for it and then I was like, "Well, I have to complete it now that I have." So I, like, started out hating mindfulness, but then 4th year of med school during COVID, my therapist put out, like, a guide that was free for the community in St. Louis on resiliency, and there were, like, other ways of practicing mindfulness that were about, like, nature or, like, doing something creative, and I really liked those, and
mm,
then applied it to, like, working out, and now can do it because I feel like I practiced it in things I like that I'm not like, "I'm bored and I don't know what I'm doing here."
mhm,
Um, and it's why it's one of my favorite cope ahead skills. It's not necessarily my cope during skill. Um,
mm, like a
so
way to
I
prime yourself.
yeah. So I think one of the things that might be useful is what do you think the purpose of mindfulness is when we're talking about mental health or using it as a coping skill, either in your own personal experience, things you've seen other people use it for, but like, how do you view mindfulness? Because it can be a lot of things.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a cliche, but I see it as a way to clear your mind.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of us, when we're dealing with anxiety or compulsions or, like, unpleasant emotions, just almost like full erasure of the whiteboard can be helpful to restart.
Yeah. So, what happens then when if someone? I feel like a lot of the reasons some people don't like mindfulness is because it's been kind of sold that way that it's like a mind clearing almost like
Mm,
anxiety demolisher, and then they'll try and do it when they're having a panic attack, and it feels like it worsens the panic attack or the panic doesn't get any better, and then they feel like they're not doing it correctly or things that are supposed to help don't help them, and they're, like, uniquely messed up, none of which are true. But I
mm,
think it is talked about a lot that way, like, "Oh, just be mindful, like, be detached, kind of don't let anything impact you."
mhm,
And the way I think about mindfulness, obviously mindfulness is much older than psychology, and is particularly present, at least in the way that we talk about it in the West, as historically dependent on Buddhism. Although you could look at other contemplative spiritualities, and certainly there may be some overlap there. But mindfulness, as you know, I'm acceptance and commitment therapy based, trained.
mhm,
Um, Mindfulness is one of the ways they talk about it in a review paper of mindfulness interventions, I think from 2017, is basically that there's two components. One, You're paying attention to one thing, sensation, experience, but you're trying to be present or mindful of one thing. And two, you're trying to accept whatever comes up while you're doing that present thing,
Mhm.
being mindful to the one thing. So, in building that ability to stay with something and bring yourself gently back without criticism, without judgment, without being like, you're messed up because you're experiencing sadness, or the podcast is bad because you're bored or they're
Mhm.
bored. That ability to tolerate that is kind of what we think of as a skill of mindfulness, at least in an ACT, and I think in DBT as well, which is really different than the idea that I usually have to talk to people about when we start of like, what do you think of the word mindful? And we got a question about this on Instagram for this episode of someone asked, why does it feel like whenever people talk about mindfulness, it feels just like, ugh, another thing I have to do? And
Mhm.
I think it can feel overwhelming in that way. Um, but what does it feel like to you to consider mindfulness in the way of being able to tolerate whatever comes up and be present to it instead of a way to relax?
Yeah, it sounds more like standing in front of a doorway and being open to whatever comes through,
Yeah.
and that's not clearing the board. Like I said before, it's just, um, non-judgmental perception of your existence.
Do you use mindfulness or like something similar with patients or with your when you've been on nights? Like you mentioned something of like getting called in the middle of the night
Yeah,
and being
so
like, yeah.
I guess in a roundabout way, one of the things I target most of my patients is, like, helping them pin down what they can and cannot control, and then I
Mhm.
try to get them to release judgment over the things they can't control about themselves. So, maybe this isn't it's more, like, conversational, but it gets at the same principle as mindfulness. So, for example, classic scenario, I feel nervous all the time, and I shouldn't feel nervous. It's wrong of me, it's a sign that I'm weak. And then I say, "Okay, how should you feel?" They're like, "Well, I should feel happy. I should feel, excited. I like my job, but I dread going to work every day." And then I say, "Okay, so you're just gonna make yourself happy? Can you control that?" And they're like, "Yeah, I can control happiness." I was like, "Can you?"
How's that
Like,
going?
yeah, no, we gotta sit there for a second, and then I say, "Make yourself the happiest you've ever been right now." Like right now. And then they kinda start to laugh, and I was like, "I thought you said you can control your emotions, and you're not happy right now? Like, what's going on?" And they're like, "Okay, well, maybe I can't control my emotions." And then I'm like, "Can you control your thoughts? Like, what else can we control?" And they're like, "Yeah, I can control my thoughts." And then I say, like, "Don't think about a monkey." And then the same thing happens. I'm like, "Did you think about the monkey?" They're like, "I thought about the monkey." And I'm like, "Oh, so we can't control our thoughts?" They're like, "Well, that's not true." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Because some of them you can control, but some of them you can't. So we have to kind of find what we can accept there." And then I say, I try to think about emotions the same way we think about physical pain.
Mm,
Like, if I step on a nail, it's gonna hurt. I can't will that pain away, but I can change how I direct it and how I accept it. And
yeah.
so I kind of practice then I'll say, like, so when you feel this emotion of anxiety or fear, try to think about it more as a roadmap to something that's going on rather than a way to punish yourself. And so then we'll sit with that emotion, be like, "Okay, so where do you think your fear is telling you?" And so it's funny because, like, I feel like I've almost, like, done this back and forth with them to get to this point, and it's the same principle as mindfulness, which is a non-judgmental acceptance of the things that they're feeling,
Mhm.
just in a more
Mhm.
roundabout way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's funny that you mentioned that. So one of the things that mindfulness-based stress reduction was first studied for was for chronic pain. Um, I use this metaphor often too, because I think it's just people have less judgment towards their physical pain than their emotional pain, but it kind of almost activates this part of them that knows how to care for themselves. Like if they're injured, or sometimes I'll talk about like, how do you treat yourself when you're like sick with a flu? Like, is there any way to bring not to be sick every day, but to be able to have that gentleness with yourself that is usually saved just for when you're feeling your absolute worst? Like, can there be a
Mhm.
point in your day where if you experience intense emotions, like I used to tell first I told myself this in medical school, but then in residency, it I've been treated well in residency, so I've had less of this happen. But basically, I remember saying to people like, "Can you should take a mental health, like, sick day if you feel like you are on the lookout for where there's a solo bathroom in the hospital because you think you're gonna cry that day, maybe you take a mental health day that day." But I think being able to activate the non-judgmental kindness as, like, a stance towards your emotions is at the core of mindfulness and what you're saying of acceptance.
Mhm.
Um, in ACT, one of the things that's we'll say instead of acceptance, just because acceptance can have a pretty negative connotation, understandably, for people, like,
It can be seen as a way to justify things that are done to you.
so we'll use the word willingness,
Mm.
which may seem semantic, and in some ways it is, but I think it's can be helpful for people, so it doesn't immediately make them think, "You just want me to accept that, like, this person's mistreating me or that this, like, unjust situation is happening."
And I guess I wanna interject here and say, like, just
Yeah.
because something's semantic does not take away from its value.
Mhm.
So it's like, I don't know, this is a pet peeve of mine, but people are like, "Yeah, the difference is just semantic." And I'm like, "Just semantic? The difference is semantic." Like,
Yeah,
semantics matter a lot.
they
It's
do.
like literally
They
it's
do.
in a lot of ways, the basis of therapy and
Yeah.
psychiatry. So
Yeah.
sorry, anyways, continue.
No, no, you're okay. I said it's not just it's like I said that because 'cause I'm reading Nancy McWilliams', the psychoanalytic diagnostic book right now, the textbook, and there's a whole chapter on how we, like, switch words when a word gets too much negative connotation in psychiatry, and then inevitably, it's like the next word gets negatively connotated, so I think that's on my mind.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that's also unrelated. But yeah, so the willingness, and that's where in ACT, that's where, like, the values kind of comes through, so we're moving a little bit, I guess we're kind of getting into all of the things of, like, why I am an ACT-based therapist because I like it for me, so I like
Mhm.
doing it with patients. Um, I would say one of the other parts of ACT that I felt was helpful on nights my 3rd year, our nights were a lot busier than my 2nd year, was, it sounds odd, but the kind of, like, values-based work. So, like, if I practice willingness of, like, the hospital and the consults are gonna be the way they are, and I'm gonna optimize to make them the least bad, and then I am willing to accept whatever there's here, then it becomes like, okay, even if I don't know that there needs to be a consult on this at 5 in the morning, is there a way for me to, like, live out the value or live out something I'm trying to learn at this point in
Mhm.
residency? Whether that's like,
Can you
okay,
explain a little bit
yeah.
more what you mean by values-based?
Yeah, so in ACT, we say, like, basically, in ACT, the aim of acceptance and the mindfulness is towards building a life that's more in line with your values. Um, so when I talk about it with my patients with chronic pain, they may have been a lifelong gardener and they've been an outdoorsy person. They liked hiking. They had this, big garden that they would, like, get down in dirt and tend to. And now they're much older and their mobility is limited by pain and they don't have the ability to, like, get down in the garden anymore. We might then go in and say, okay, on one hand, we can grieve that you can't do this thing in the same way anymore, and we can say, you love making something grow. You feel so connected to nature.
Mhm.
Can we bring plants inside? Can we put them up on a table? Can we live this value and what you love about it out in a different way? So for me, for values in the hospital, it's like, okay, I want to be better at talking with people sensitively about their trauma in multiple settings, which means different
Mhm.
things in, like, the emergency department where they don't have where they're in a bed in the hallway versus if I'm seeing them outpatient for 2 years to do trauma work.
Yeah.
But I can
Or
still
I
try
want
to
to
live
be
that out.
good at tolerating my own frustration.
Yeah. When I was on nights my 2nd year, I jokingly started saying this, but I was like, "I'm practicing my radical acceptance. I'm practicing my distress tolerance skill."
Yeah. I mean, you say that with jest, but you are.
No, but I am laughing, but if you ask anyone in my residency, you'll know that I was for serious. Like, it did help to think of it that way. So, yeah, so that's values work. I think in DBT, they would say building a life worth living. So, like,
Mm.
building value or they use some of the value stuff too. But I think that's also kind of a cope ahead skill. So I think mindfulness actually as a cope ahead skill where it builds the ability to stay present to things and it builds that kind of attentional muscle and ability to stay with like minorly hard things in mindfulness, like boredom, so that when big hard emotions show up, you have a kind of bigger capacity to hold them. And then I think the values part is saying, I can't control, like you're saying in your work with your patients, I can't control what this night shift's going to be like, but I can FaceTime with my nephews before I go into the shift. I
Mhm.
can bring some food that I really like. I can bring my yoga mat and stretch for a couple minutes or do 300 push-ups. Uh,
Yeah.
but
I
I'm
can
tired.
control whether or not I go get those, like, little watermelon gummy wedges from the bistro before I go down and see the consult.
Yep. Yeah. So I think of all three of those as the things I do before. Um, I wonder with your experience with nights or how you talk to patients, like when they have something difficult coming up, whether that's because they have to give a presentation at work or they have to see a family member be in a
Mhm.
situation that's been hard for them or they're struggling with grief. Um, well, it's actually not the grief one. So things before, how do you think for yourself and your patients, like how to cope ahead and build some infrastructure there?
Yeah. It's funny you should say infrastructure because I think I actually called it a scaffolding the other day. I'm in my PowerPoint era right now in therapy. So if I'm online, I'll share a screen and make a little PowerPoint and be like, "Okay." I'm like, "Let's get to the root of what you're actually afraid of." And then I kinda try to put them in the driver's seat. I'm like, "I'm just gonna put stuff out here and you can agree or disagree with it, or you can make your own suggestions." But, like, somewhere there's something that we're truly afraid of, and I don't think it's just, like, your physics professor. I think it's something else. We're kinda like, "Okay." So we kind of we build from there, and so a lot of it, I try to kind of follow in some ways, the maladaptive core belief or the true
Mm,
fear to what the person's afraid of and what they're attaching it to. So I'll start with what it sounds like there's a statement you make about yourself that's if my son turns out um amoral or misbehaved, I'm a bad parent, right? And I'm like, well, what does being a bad parent say about you? Why is that not okay?
mhm,
You know,
mhm.
oh, if I'm a bad parent, then I've failed as a person and I'll live a bad life. I'm a bad person, you know. So then I'll kind of like we'll sit with this and I'll say, okay, what do you think about the statement? If my son misbehaves, I've failed as a person or failed as a human. They're kind of like, oh, like that really hits. Or it'll be like, no, I don't think
Yeah,
that's it. It's not right.
yeah.
You know, maybe it's more about like I've let other people down or something. So then I try to challenge it and say like, okay, well, what if is it possible to be like a good parent or a good person and have your son misbehave? Like maybe these things are attached and they shouldn't be. Maybe it's possible for you to be like a good scientist and perform poorly on a test. And so by almost like preemptively or anticipating where these
Mm,
reflexive attachments are going to be made and disentangling them, then if there's
mhm,
a bad performance on the test, the hammer's not going to come back as hard.
mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
saying like you care a lot about contributing to the world and investigating these things. And one of the ways we measure your competency to do that is these like science exams. And also, if you do great on them, does that mean you're going to be a great scientist? No. So maybe we're too focused on these tests.
So helping them kind
You
of
know.
be aware of the automatic stories or schemas that come up and make, as we say in this is, I think, a metaphor from Buddhism originally, but now it's in mindfulness-based things of just, like, helping people recognize the second arrow, the story being, like, the first arrow is the
Hmm.
pain life throws at you, and the second one is the one that some of these ways of coping or thinking that we come by honestly, but we can change, make it way worse, where it's like, "You failed a test, that sucks, that's really hard already," and then it's like, "Your dreams are stupid and you're worth nothing." It's like, so that's not
Hmm.
gonna help you out during it, and so you're
Yeah.
helping them notice those, so when they come back up in the moment, they'll be able to.
Right. So yeah. So we'll practice that almost like saying like whether I do great on this test or terrible on this test, it doesn't define my value as a scientist or a human or a person. And so Like, we'll practice that, and then they'll say, like, it's helpful because it takes, like, the wind out of the sails of this enemy ship right before you go into battle, you know? And so maybe the celebration isn't as great because it doesn't have as much power to it, but also you're not you're not giving the power to something outside of yourself for
Yeah.
how you're defining your value. So, like, I think that's kind of like my pre-coping ritual. I try to really target what, like you said, stories we tell ourselves and also where we're placing the value of ourself
Mhm.
and try to kind of move those pieces around so that when the storm comes, all the china's not gonna fall off the shelf. Like, we're not storing all the expensive urns on the top shelf. We're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, wait, we have a basement. Okay, we can stabilize things here."
Yeah. No, I really like that because I think I do a lot of that with my patients too, but I think even in, like, the being on nights example, like, I think there's so much in medicine that we're given bad scripts during med school of how you should feel about being a doctor, how being a resident should feel, how healthcare should feel to be practicing in, and both the really good and the really bad scripts don't help us. So, the ones that are like, residency is only awful and you're just gonna feel bad and, like, doesn't this
And
suck? And
suck it
how
up.
we normalize all of that where it's just like, yeah, we complain in medicine a lot. And it's like, okay, sometimes that's not helpful either because then there's this cynical jadedness that prevents you from being able to recognize when you've done something that's, like, meaningful or worthwhile. Uh, and then the overly good one that we talk about a lot of like, "Oh, what do you mean you don't have perfect empathy?" Or, "What do you mean you're annoyed or you're tired?" Or da 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 da. Um and so I think you're right. It's like it takes out some of these, like, if you did really well and finally get this big reward, maybe you'll be like, my worth is somewhere else. There's not as much of a high from it. But it also takes out this roller coaster of the highs and honestly, more frequently, the lows.
Mhm.
Um, so that's all of our prepping ahead. After we come back from this break, we're going to talk about a little bit in the moment coping skills and maybe kind of post processing skills. And then we're going to answer a couple of questions people had about this. So we will be right back.
Oh, I'm excited. I like answering questions.
I love questions. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what I'm doing in the current moment, which is trying to cope with with middle of the nights Preston right now.
I've been antagonizing her a lot.
You have. It's good for my moral character. It's building my radical
Well,
acceptance.
it's really because earlier in the episode, if you were listening, she goes, "There's no wrong way to meditate." And then she's like, "Okay, Preston, why don't you listen? She's so good at, actually, you're doing it wrong.
You know what?
This is
And
terrible." And
because
I'm like,
because
"Okay,
I
well, I
forgot,
guess it."
I didn't realize I was talking to an 8-year-old who I had to tell them that you have to actually be trying at the mindfulness and not making a complete
Well,
joke out of
well,
it for
what
it
if
to
I
work.
was trying? Okay.
Try
You don't
better.
know that.
I believe in you too much to accept that as the effort you can give.
I'm getting smaller in my chair.
Just yeah. Anyway, so now we're going to talk about coping skills in the moment, and I think we should start by saying you mentioned one earlier you do like on nights, and I will agree with you. The 4:30 a.m. call when you've been super busy and you're like, oh my god, nothing. I'm going to X out of Epic and try and get a little bit of sleep tonight, and then it's like, pager goes off. Is like viscerally, I feel that, and it's been a year since I've been on call, so I do not envy you that. What ways do you like if you have like a really hard night where not that exact moment, but like it's really busy, everyone's mad for some reason, and it's just like everything's going sideways and you or have 4 notes you still need to write.
Mhm.
How do you feel like what helps you lower that stress and stay like coping?
So I learned this during medicine. I'm smiling because, like, I can picture moments where I apply this directly. Never underestimate the power of a hot girl walk. It hits. I'm telling you, dude.
I
So,
thought you were
like,
about to say a hot girl, and I was like, we're gonna have to cut this, Preston.
no, I will plot, triage my work and say, like, "Okay, I'm gonna write this note, then HGW, this note,
Love it.
HGW2." That's hot girl walk if you're not following.
If you're dumb, it's hot
Yeah.
girl walk.
So, no, but I'll
Preston,
be
do you
like,
wanna explain the what a hot girl walk is for
"Yeah."
those listening who
So,
are not
I just
chronically on TikTok?
I have found places in the hospital where I can do, like, a good lap, usually about, like, 500 steps or so at at one of the hospitals I stay, it's just like it's almost like the terrace, like the mezzanine level, just kind of goes in one big circle. So I just knock out a lap, write a whole console note, knock out a lap, and then you want to spice it up? AirPods in, staff with your attending while you're walking, if you can.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
So, and then, dude, nothing makes me feel like Kendall Roy from Succession knocking out a business deal I'm like freaking walking with my headphones. I'm like kind of punching the air, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna discharge them tonight, and I don't care what the primary teams, you know. It's like
You're like,
this guy's
always
locked
be
in. It's like the
discharging.
janitor's just like watching me go by. He's like, that's the 16th time that guy's walked past me tonight. He's like, he okay?
I'm just picturing you like gesticulating wildly in like a big like tracksuit that's like you have a fanny pack. You're there. You're wearing sunglasses in the hospital.
Tap said, hold on for a second. Can I get a tall mochaccino venti frap situation, oat milk, double shot, thanks. Yeah, as I was saying, we're not gonna do Prozac. Their QT's way too freaking long, bro.
You'll never make it in this hospital if you
Yeah.
don't understand what I'm saying.
all five fingers are touching in the middle. Yeah.
Like,
So no,
it's like the brand new intern on service.
the
You're
February
like,
intern. Yeah.
yeah, you're like, I've never heard a stupider question.
Is there a camera in here? Am I getting pranked right now? You guys got to be pranking Leah. I only got two legs, and it sounds like you're trying to pull a third one
Oh
right
my
now.
God. I mean, like, it's rich that we're a psych saying this because I know that, like, similar to the Succession character, I know we're saying shit at 3 a.m. to like card surgery or something that's like, well, dramaturgically, I don't think their psychosis has the intrinsic meaning that you think. It's just like, shut up, psych.
No. I was like, oh God,
Like,
what
oh,
did I
sorry, my
say?
tweed jacket just got stuck on on the bookshelf next to me at home.
I said something like that. I was like, I think you need to conceptualize their organization of behavior as something coming secondary to more of an organic physical illness rather than like a mental pathology. And they're like IMs or not. Like benzos or not. And I'm like yes or no. Like, okay, pump the brakes. It's not that simple. They're like, yes, it is. I was like, okay, I am Ativan, fine.
Well, if we take more of a
Just like what
psychodynamic
the PRN
lens, and they're
said.
like, I'll kill you. I'm like, honestly, that's fair. You guys haven't slept in 2 days.
I know.
In the moment, I will say, like, from a night's perspective, just as we've gotten questions on this, and maybe it'll be the most helpful, I also found like trying to still hit my step goal huge. And like I'm in a hospital system that it's like multiple hospitals connected. So like honestly wasn't hard because it was like the call room was one place and the other one was like 2 hospitals over. So I was like, I'm getting my steps and I'm feeling better when I'm getting my steps. My notes are better.
Do you ever pick a vending machine that you know is like 3 hospitals away? And that's kind of like your goal? You're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, these gummy bears will be the reward at the end
Yep.
of.
Yep.
Dude.
Or I'd be like, we get like you get like a meal ticket or whatever when we're on call. And I was like, these specific sour gummy worms I'm not allowed to eat them any other time than when I'm on call. And I was on call a lot. So it was like, it wasn't like, ooh, it's a cheat meal. It was like, I need these to retain as much ability to give me joy and uniqueness as I can. So I was like, I'm going to power up for my half-mile hospital walk. And I'm going to have the gummy bears when I get back while I write those 2 notes I've been avoiding.
Absolutely.
So I feel like building in little moments of joy on call, really hard moments when you can't avoid them. I also found that like I would bring my yoga mat and sometimes just taking 5 minutes to not. This is more like when it's 3 a.m. and you've been like talking to people all day and night, and there's another one waiting for you, and you're like, I cannot get these 3 notes. Like my brain's not working. I found getting out of my brain and into my body with a walk or with like a yoga with Adriene, like 5-minute stretch video I would feel so much better and so much less overwhelmed when I sat back down at the computer. I still wouldn't feel great, but I would feel like 20% better.
No, I feel that too after the walk. Like after anything that's like getting the blood flowing. And what sucks, and I wish it did this, like doing something like scrolling on Instagram does not do that.
No.
Like a social media break or anything, it just doesn't help you get back. If anything, it makes you dread more the
Yeah,
work that
it's
you're gonna
too
have to
fun
do.
in some ways.
Yeah. So I found like, okay, if I need to get all this work done, I'm like, I can't go on social media. I can't like try to do something I enjoy to like get me along. I need to like move or exercise or even just like sit quietly. I had
Yeah,
this senior when I was an intern on medicine. I respected him so much because we would be in like the most hectic kind of afternoon. You know, we have like patients that are coding or rapid responses. We've got new admissions coming in that are kind of dumpster fires in the ED. And he would like take stock. He's like, okay, Preston, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, we're waiting on transport for this guy and we're doing this other thing. He goes, and then would just say, nobody talk to me for 90 seconds. And he would just have this blanket and just wrap himself in the blanket and turn around in his chair and just go, like, I don't know if he was meditating. I don't know if he was sleeping or whatever, but I was like, this man can freaking cope. And then he'd pop back out of it and he'd be like, all right, let's rock and roll. I was
yeah,
like, God
yeah,
damn, Kevin. Like,
yeah. It's
honestly,
always some dude named Kevin who, like, whips shit out like that,
yeah.
and I
And I'm
love
pretty
it.
sure Kevin has just like figured this out intuitively. He's
Yeah.
he's not a big therapy guy, just it's just a man trying to survive.
Well, I won't say you describing that, it doesn't sound like the biggest therapy guy. It sounds like a good coping skill, but it also sounds like,
Yeah.
damn. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other in the moment things. I think, we won't go into the DBT of it all by talking about tips skills, but there are other sensory ways to help yourself regulate
So
emotion.
I use controlled breathing a decent amount.
Yeah. Do you
I
wanna
call
talk
it
about
box
that?
breathing with my
Yeah.
patients. So one thing I'll do is I try to identify like how important in the moment coping is for someone. Because we talked about earlier, someone has a big test coming up. They have a lot of their stressors may be ahead of them.
Mhm.
Then I have some patients that their main stressor is that they just are like raging in traffic.
Mhm.
So in the moment coping is super effective
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
them or just important.
Yeah.
And I'm in San Antonio, which is number 1 in Texas for road rage. So
Which
there's a
is,
high
as someone
demand
living
for
in
in the moment
Boston, that's
coping.
interesting to me because it feels like here it's not.
Yeah. Anyways, so with box breathing, I think about having someone draw a box with their breaths.
Mhm.
So you want to exhale longer than you inhale. So think about creating this rectangle where you exhale along the horizontal and then you inhale on the vertical. So
Mm.
it's like 4 seconds exhaling and then 2 seconds inhaling. And so what I do is to kind of make it more of a game for them because I think I have to gamify stuff. I say, look, almost like I spy. I'm like, look for rectangles in your environment
Mhm.
and try to trace
Mm. Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
And for patients in traffic, it's like license plates.
Mhm.
So, and I didn't even come up with that. I'll tell them to look for things and they came back and they're like, dude, I was in traffic and I would just be tracing license plates and it actually helped.
Oh, that's good.
Like,
Like, I
you
got in a
look to the
bunch of
left, you see a
accidents, but
license plate, and then you trace that one, and then you trace the one in front of you, and then you trace the one to your right. And so, like, it was helping them kind of center themselves
Mhm.
and also, like, activating their parasympathetic nervous system to
Yeah.
bring down some of that frustration. And the other thing I'll talk about is there's a physiologic benefit to
Mhm.
that controlled breathing. It's not just like taking a moment.
Yeah.
When you slow your breathing down like that, when you fill your chest up like that, the
Mhm.
expanded chest is going to stimulate your vagus nerve more. It's going to slow down your heart rate.
Mhm.
It's gonna inhibit a little bit of that anxiety as being released into your limbic system.
Mhm.
So it has a physiologic calming effect, and I try to kind of sell that part of it as well, rather than just like, oh, so it's something else to focus on as a distractor. No, it's also medicine. Like your breath is medicine in that way.
Yeah. Breath is so interesting because there's so much that's said about it online. There's stuff that's said about it in therapy. And then there's, like, the actual relationship between different, like, length of breath and how it theoretically does or does not impact your kind of, like, parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system heart rate, and if that actually, like, applies. And I think people get lost in it. I certainly have gotten lost in it before, but I think, yeah, giving people something to anchor on with breath as a way to kind of get through these, like, short-term moments is super helpful, And maybe different types of breath are more or less helpful. Someone asked us if we could talk about breath work. If you want us to do a deep dive, please leave us a comment on like the YouTube or podcast and let us know, and we'll do it. Uh, but yeah, I think I give people, before you had interrupted my mindfulness meditation, I give people not a box breath, but a similar, like, I work with trauma patients a lot. So I feel like giving as much body autonomy as possible is how I think
Mhm.
about breath work. And so I try to give them like a frame that is pretty flexible in case there's someone like who, if they kind of try and do a longer breath, they start suddenly feeling really panicky and anxious, that it's like they have freedom to do a shorter breath cycle or whatever feels okay in their body. Because some people can feel, and some people in mindfulness in general, even without breathwork focus, can feel that like increased anxiety or hypervigilance. Um, to the other point, in terms of like other, I think in the moment sensory, maybe not mindfulness, but attention or positive distraction that is not going to harm you is kind of the core that I think about of in the moment coping skills. So if you can go somewhere physically different, if you can distract yourself, like if you're like, I hate writing these notes, or I'm really stressed right now. Maybe that was for me eating one of the sour gummies. I was like literally,
Mhm.
sometimes we'll use on the units, if we're doing DBT, we'll use like scent, but that grounding and embodiment in general, I think can be a very powerful tool to reduce the volume of the intensity of an emotion in the moment. Maybe not take it to zero, maybe not solve it, but bring it down to make it so that you can get through it.
I do that at home, so almost like I employ like a ritual as needed.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because like you're making me think about like OCD, which is almost like a natural coping skill that people develop for such intense surges of anxiety.
Mhm.
In a lot of ways, the compulsions that people have or those like ritualistic behaviors are developed coping skills,
Yeah.
and they are adaptive in the moment, and then they eventually become maladaptive. But the process of using a ritual to relieve yourself of some form of anxiety, it
Mhm.
still stands.
Yes. Yeah.
So one thing that I'll do is actually like make espresso. It's and so many people are like, why don't you just get an espresso press and it can be so much more convenient? And I'm trying to be like, no, like the process
Mhm.
of weighing out 18 grams of beans, grinding it, mixing it in with the tamper, and like watching come down, it's therapeutic for me.
Mhm.
Like it's a set, like it's like a 3-minute ritual.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
and I do it when I'm like stressed at home or if I'm trying to like center myself before I go to work or something like that in the moment. So having that like little ritual that I know I can go do is
Mhm.
super is really helpful. It's tough to like prescribe that to someone because
Yeah.
I can't be like, "Hey, buddy, like buy an espresso machine."
That's gonna help your anxiety.
It goes crazy, like trust me. No, but what I try to do is I try to find if they have something that they enjoy and I say like, "What can your ritual be?"
Yeah.
Like, and
I
so for
totally
some
agree.
people, like it might be doodling or or maybe it's like um fidgeting or even like a small stress ball or something like that. Like they find a way to do it like intentionally rather than subconsciously, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. I think it also offers this non-judgmental perspective. I always tell people like coping skills are, a hammer can be a great hammer, but you probably don't want one to unscrew something, right? But that doesn't mean a hammer is bad at its job, or that it's not something you want to have in a toolbox. Similar with like distraction. Distraction is a great tool that is useful at different times and only becomes like the literal meaning of maladaptive when it's the wrong tool for the wrong job or the only tool that we have. Um, I think, and I agree with you. I kind of connect this when I'm doing ACT with people to like values work as well. The values is like, sounds like a kind of like high flying term. I also use it as like, what do you just like day to day? Like, not that you like for some other reason because it makes you somehow better or how you should be or helps you take care of your kids or be a better, spouse or something, but like, what do you just like in and of itself? And it sounds like for you, like that is the kind of espresso um,
Mhm.
process. But I agree with you. And I also often talk to people about mindfulness at first as doing kind of what you do with that, of like, let's start with something you already kind of inherently like and build on the attentional capacity by focusing on something you already like to focus on. And then we'll eventually go to things that you don't like to focus on.
Mm, I like that.
So maybe we should have started by making coffee together on the beginning of the episode.
That would have been fun. Yeah. So
Yeah.
mindfulness would have been me just bringing the camera over and showing you how to make coffee, which is one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
I love making lattes for people and having them watch. Usually, like they kind of enjoy the process. It's fun to
Mhm.
watch the espresso come out, and I'm like, oh, I get to share my hobby with them.
Well, when
And
I visit you
then
in
I
March
produce
in 2 weeks
something
for my
nice.
friend's wedding, I'll be like, "Show me the mindfulness," and you'll be like
Okay.
and then I'll be like, "Now you need to sit and be silent for 20 minutes." I'll be like, "Mine's reading quietly alone."
Oh, darn it.
I do think that, like, when we do DBT or, like, I'm thinking of some of the child units that, like, making a physical, visible coping kind of toolkit can be helpful, not because all of your coping skills are literally gonna be physical and in there, but I think sometimes the visual reminder can be really helpful when people are, like, in the middle of panic or a trigger
Mhm.
or just feeling bad because it's hard to cognitively pull it back. It's easier than if we'd never talked about these things at all, but
Yeah.
it's even easier if we can have a physical reminder of it.
This is a little bit tangential, but one thing that does annoy me about how we conceptualize coping skills in the, like, inpatient or just, like, in the medical setting in general
Mhm.
is that, like, have you ever made a safety plan where you're fighting with someone to list more than 3 coping skills? And I'm kind of the perspective that one good coping skill is a lot better than a bunch of lip service,
Yeah,
because
I agree.
there's definitely situations where the patient's like, "Listen to music, go drawing," and I'm like, "When's the last time you've drawn anything?" They're like, "It's been years." I'm like, "Okay, then why this isn't a good coping skill for you."
Yeah,
Like, when you go back out in the world and you're in crisis and we're writing down drawing on your safety plan as something,
right,
like and it's, like, for them, I'm like, it's okay if just, like, controlled breathing is your only coping skill for, like, that acute crisis moment, if that's, like, effective for you. But I think that there's, like, something to be said about how we, as a medical system, fail to acknowledge, like, the value of these, like, coping skills, and we just kinda want hope to, like, list them off.
right.
To continue with, like, kind of my gripes with the safety plan,
Yeah.
you go down to, like, reasons for living for someone, and they'll be like, "To provide for my family," and I'm like, "Okay, we gotta get 2 more." They're like, "What do you mean 2 more?" I'm like, "Well, the sheet says I have to fill out 3, otherwise it's gonna get, like, pinged back by my attendings because they're gonna say we filled out a bad, safety plan."
Yeah.
So I don't know, I think when we try to find good ways to cope or try to find, like, values or reasons, it
Mhm.
can be effective to only search for, like, the one that's successful to you rather than trying to, like, expand the toolbox for the sake
Right.
of expanding it, which I think is, like, something that I've been spoon-fed a lot of, and now I'm, like, trying to unlearn.
Yeah. I feel like so many of the coping skills, coping tools, to continue this metaphor, is like people will be like, "We okay." It's like when I first moved into med school into my, like, own apartment after living in, like, my parents' house or dorms, and it was like my dad got me, like, a little toolkit, and it was like, "Okay, here you go." And it's kinda like what we do with our coping, so we're like, "Okay, guys, here it is. Here's your coping skills." And then we leave, and similar to me in my apartment in med school, I didn't know how to put a nail in a wall the correct way, like, just because you have been taught, like, you've been told, "Here they are," how to actually use them takes a
Mhm,
lot of time and teaching and experiencing, and that's why I think you're gonna really like being full-time outpatient next year, because I feel like only now, when I've, like, worked iteratively with someone over multiple sessions, do I feel like their safety plan I think they're valuable regardless, but I think they become really valuable resources when you do have this time to get to know them and that you're like, "Oh, you mentioned this a couple sessions ago. Maybe we should put that on as a good way to connect when you're feeling really lonely or isolated in your
mhm,
safety plan." That takes a lot
yeah,
of time.
and I think I have, to be honest, a jaded view of a lot of safety plans right now because most of the ones I perform are, like, inpatient where someone's just trying to leave the hospital. I'll
Hmm.
be in, like, in a landlocked state, and they're like, "Sailing is my number one." I'm like, "Dude, do you own a boat?" They're like, "I don't know. Sounds nice." And you're like, I know that you don't care and I don't care and you just wanna leave, but, like, we gotta we gotta do something here,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think it's kind of just led me to this feeling that a lot of these documents can feel performative and almost like a legalese
Yeah.
CYA situation,
It
and
can
so
feel
I'm
like we
trying
kind of
to
skimmed off the top, like it's like we, like, took things that maybe worked or were like a marker when people used to be inpatient for more than 4 days, and they were a reflection of the narrative of the relationship that you had formed with them as their clinician. Whereas when they're there for 3 days, it's like, "Okay, we're gonna do this," but it's like, where was the relationship that was underneath it and the time that actually maybe was the thing that mattered the most about why this document
Mhm.
existed?
You spent a grand total of an hour with them, like 3 20-minute interviews.
Although I do think there's an art to how do we make the most of even like, how do we not give in to this idea? How do we push for better, more meaningful connections and having the time to be with our patients? And how do we make the most of the time that we do have? I mean, I'll always ask people, like, when I first meet them inpatient, like, what do you do when you're feeling not depressed? Like, what do you like to
Mhm.
do? Who do you hang out with? And then come back to those things every time I see them so that when we make the safety plan, it's like, what about this friend you mentioned who's, like, always there for you that I saw you, like, light up when you talked about the last time you saw them and you, like, went to the sorry, I was about to say went to the beach because I was gonna flex on your landlocked state.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, it's I think one of the things of doing this episode is, like, I agree with you, I don't want it to feel like people that were like, "Let's list 40 things that you could try to do," and have it just feel like a list of things that, like, people can blame themselves for. It's like, "Oh, if you just done the perfect set of coping skills, then you wouldn't feel
Mhm.
sad and it's your fault." And that's definitely not what
Yeah.
we want to be
And
imposed.
for anyone listening, I want you to know I am pro safety plan. Like, I recognize that there's value in it. I'm being kind of a hater right now, but I think it's just because this is an effective clinical tool that we know prevents people from completing suicide that we apply incorrectly in a lot of settings.
Mhm.
And that's, like, where my frustration is.
Yeah.
I think this is I feel pretty satisfied with our in the moment coping skills.
Yes.
How do you?
Yeah.
So now we can move on to questions.
We
Question
can move on.
time?
Okay.
Okay,
Are you ready for
questions.
we'll do a couple questions. I'm gonna challenge us to try and answer questions in, like, a couple-minute response.
Okay. And
Let's
we'll
see if
try
we
to
can
be
do it.
direct too.
Huh?
Direct.
Direct, yeah. Okay.
Non-politician answers.
Not Um, okay, so one I got from Megan Fox Skidmore, who I will say is my, friend from St.
Any
Louis,
relation
to
to Megan Fox?
no,
Oh.
sad. Sad for you. Uh, Tips for balancing mindfulness and overthinking, or are they unrelated? I'll go first and you can go second, okay? I would say that I see a lot of patients and just people in general, and certainly myself, wonder about, like, well, I'm detail oriented and I, in some ways, overthink, but also the detail oriented part of me I value. Um, and is mindfulness going to kind of make me less n- able to be kind of really attuned and noticing things? Because sometimes I'm right and I notice things other people don't or details other people don't. I think they can very much be related. And I think mindfulness practice, I always think of people on a spectrum of like, not everyone needs the same advice. Not everyone needs to be more mindful or would find it helpful or useful to be more mindful. But if you're someone who's overthinking and it pulls you out of one, things that you want to be present to, so you don't want to be thinking at work about work when you're like trying to have dinner with your like partner or something. I think mindfulness can be a really great skill to practice to help you not be overthinking about things that you're not currently in.
Mhm.
I think the second thing I would say is mindfulness might be hard for people who struggle with overthinking because I think in the word overthinking, it's like there's 1,000 thoughts a minute. And so going at the right pace for mindfulness and not being like, I'm going to sit and have no thoughts for 30 minutes, or I'm going to judge myself if I have a lot of thoughts. Starting slow, again, maybe starting with mindfulness in something that you already sort of like, and being really, really gentle with noticing what your mind does. And that if you want to be more present and less thinking all the time, starting really slow and going, and then noticing and encouraging yourself, like, I'm doing something hard. This is very hard for me and I can see myself growing in it slowly.
Mhm. I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Damn.
It's that, when you're anxious, you're overthinking, which is kind of what I'm picturing. You're entertaining hypothetical situations, which by definition is not being present. So kind of entertaining hypotheticals and being present in the moment are in a lot of ways opposed to each other. So just try to find that balance between them. And I don't know. I think you have to be the barometer for what that balance is. Okay. Next question.
Okay, here's this one's more of an opinion question. So, do you think the concept of mindfulness has been diluted by influencer wellness space?
Yes.
Say more. You're like, yes, next
No, I
question.
think I've fallen victim to like seeing it as this chuggy granola, like vacuous advice given by people that proclaim themselves to be gurus. And I think that like you mentioned with Nancy McWilliams earlier, like it's caught in some flack from that. And I think it makes me feel more empowered to kind of just like poo-poo it in a lot of situations, but
Mhm.
there's still value to it. And I think the only antidote to that is really clarifying like what mindfulness is. And I don't want to be like oh, this isn't true mindfulness, like this isn't true
Like me at the beginning of this
socialism, but
episode. Your mindfulness is wrong and you are bad.
yeah, but
Yeah.
also like there are parameters to this.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
so yes, I do think it's diluted and we need to fight back.
The only thing I'll add to that is that I think there are situations, like socioeconomically, when we think about like the social determinants of health, that make mindfulness easier or not as easy to do. It can be difficult for anyone, right? Mental health can impact
Mhm.
anyone. Anyone can have an anxiety disorder, OCD. But I do think like if you don't feel if you're someone who is more likely to have been through trauma, or if you're more likely to be somewhere where you don't feel safe to go on a walk, doing mindfulness is a much different thing than for someone who feels super safe in a safe neighborhood, like never are targeted in any way by like people in public. So I think that's the other part of the wellness thing is that it's often these, and I say this as a straight sized white woman, like it's often people who are like, okay, come with me in this stressful day.
As an
Mindfulness is
Orange
so
County Pilates
good.
mom.
Yeah, exactly. It's like their life can be hard. I'm not saying twisting it anyway, but I just think like, like if someone is in a situation that would cause like if you're afraid you're going to be shot in your neighborhood, it's pretty hard to be like, let me just practice like not being attached to this. Like there are very
Mhm.
different situations that
Yeah.
impact someone's ability to be like, just be and I agree with you that there's kind of this like floaty, like mindfulness is just like it's being at peace. It's just, I can disconnect from my emotions and kind of has this almost like overly pure Gwyneth
Yeah. And then
Paltrow.
also like it bleeds into like weaponized therapy language to like,
Yeah.
I can't do this thing for you because I need to be mindful and support myself right now. And then you're like, what is
Yeah.
this? Is this whole thing just like a tactic for you to get leverage over
Mm,
why you're like morally superior to people, but also could
mhm.
be like a shitty person?
Yeah.
So I think it gets that flack too.
Yeah. No, I think exactly.
Okay, next question.
Here's our last question. It's sort of related, but I think especially we're filming this in the winter still, and in the US. How can people practice mindfulness with news and media consumption?
All right, Shanti, you're listening.
Shanti
Shanti,
did
one of
not
our
ask this
producers,
question. She did
she
not.
she goes, "I'm really looking forward to this episode because I spent the entire morning screaming at the TV." She didn't say what she was screaming at, but one the mind wanders. One can only imagine.
The mind wanders. Um, I talked about this with one of my supervisors today who works in trauma, and I really like the way she set it up. Um, I think it gets at like a core, deeper thing of how we help patients set themselves up to navigate difficult times. Um, with the particularity around like the news cycle being asking that, like going deeper with kind of like the values work and saying, how much do you think is reasonable for you to check with frequency that would keep you informed enough? What is the things you can control and can't control? And then for a lot of people right now, a lot of things in the news are upsetting. And so beyond making sure that they're safe, asking then, what is my capacity to turn this energy and this righteous anger into action in some small or big, but local way to create more of what I want to see in the world.
Invest locally.
Invest locally, shop small business. um, but I think that all you have to start there a little bit, and then it helps you inform you. Like maybe someone thinks if I read like the front page of the online like New Yorker or like Atlantic or something, whatever. It's like if I watch 30 minutes of like national news on this channel, or I let myself scroll where I like watch news people online, but if they contain it. But I think you first have to kind of unpack both, I think, some of the news media, some of the administration, some of like the technology of these apps are based on the attention economy, meaning they profit more the more you pay attention. So
Yeah, they want clicks and they're playing off your
yeah,
emotions.
yeah. Asking yourself outside of that system, like what's reasonable to me and what accomplishes my goals with this.
Yeah, and so I think that's, like, a very reasonable in a lot of ways, like, unsatisfying answer.
Oh,
Ask yourself
it's
what's reasonable and then do that. Oh, I'm sure the person reading that is like, "Thank you."
that's fair.
So what I would say is, to quote Kendrick Lamar, "Turn that TV off, turn that TV off." Um, I so I listen to The Daily almost every day on the way to work, and I like, the last couple days, like, I'll pull up the title, it'll be like, "Trump's new export deportation policy," and I'm like, "I can't do it. I can't listen to another 30-minute depressing story about, like, the state of our country right now." I'm like, "We're" so I'll just listen to hyperpop instead. Um, and and the theme today is to be like to forgive yourself for what you can cope with, and, like,
Mhm,
sometimes you're like, "Okay, I can't change anything about these deportation policies like we said,
mhm,
but, like, I can do, like, a good job at work today. So if listening to this is gonna make me depressed or make me more pissed off or something, then I might be there less for my patients than I'd like to be."
right,
So
right.
so I'm like, "Okay, if this is gonna cause me to have negative emotions, then that's enough for me to kind of take it off at this point."
Mhm,
Because and maybe I have a high threshold for that, but even a lot of negative news, most of it I can consume without feeling a ton of emotion. I'm just kinda
mhm,
like, "Oh, that's interesting." It's
mhm.
usually curiosity is what drives it
Yeah,
or, like, some understanding.
yeah.
The other actionable thing that I'll offer is American tabloids and news sources are very invested in the attention economy and getting, like, these controversial clicks within our own issues. So what I'll do instead is I'll listen to the BBC.
Mhm,
So the British broadcasting, networks or like The Rest Is Politics is run
mhm,
by a lot of British hosts. They talk about the US in a way that doesn't feel like they're trying to fire you up.
mhm.
They're just like, "This is what we're seeing from across the pond." Oh, sorry, "This is what we're seeing from across the pond."
That's gonna be our intro.
"Oh, those darn Americans having trouble passing another bill, in it.
Right.
Welcome to another Tuesday, Rest is Politics." And "Ah, soothing." But then when I hear them talk about what's going on in our country, I know it's filtered through a bias of a foreigner, but also it, like, pisses me off less
Yeah,
because I don't feel like someone's trying to fish a response out of me.
yeah.
So, if you really need to consume something, um, responsibly, or you feel obligated to be informed,
Mhm,
weirdly enough, like Al Jazeera, BBC, like, other countries' news networks can give you different perspectives on the same events that are happening here.
right, right. Yeah, no, I agree, I agree. But though they would still have to choose to this is why I'm saying the macro picture before they do that is pick think about, like, like, reasonably like, not r okay, I hate reasonably now the way you said it. I realize how this sounds.
Margaret's answer everything. Look at yourself and be reasonable.
No, I more mean, like,
Oh, thanks,
you
Margaret. So
no,
helpful.
I more mean, like, before you get on your phone, like, take 30 minutes on paper, not every day, I'm saying once, or with your therapist or with a friend, and say, "Why is it so important to me? Like, what is underneath this? Like, what do I actually value, and what is the anxiety that's being provoked by it?" And then you do what you do, which is then saying, "Okay, how do we make this concrete? How do we add things so I don't have to rely on my, like, willpower when I'm like,
Mhm.
scared because the news just said this and it's targeting me or someone I
Yeah.
love." Um, but thank you for undermining me.
No, of course. It's
No, of
what I
course,
live
no
to do.
worries.
Do you ever feel like
Killing
consuming
you?
news
Yeah.
is like that scene from Harry Potter when Dumbledore is drinking the potion, the Horcrux, and Harry keeps force
I have
feeding
to
into
keep
him?
drinking.
He's like you said, remember, you have to keep drinking. And he's like,
Me to myself.
It's like another story about how like federal aid is being cut to national parks.
Psychiatry is made up for new administration.
RFK Jr. is coming for antipsychotics and SSRIs.
You must drink.
Please, Dumbledore,
You're almost
please.
done.
Remember what you said.
Did you put your name in the goblet of fire? Okay.
Dumbledore has calmly.
Just gonna stim for the rest of the episode. That's how we cope.
One way I've been coping is I'm trying to do that scene, that chess scene, but in a Scottish accent.
No, not me, not Hermione. That one.
No, not me, not Hermione.
You.
It's you've got to go on there. Do you want Snape to get his grimy paws on that stone or not? No, run, no. There must be another way.
Oh, to live in your brain. Oh, to live in your brain. Not you.
I have nothing else productive for this episode.
Not Hermione.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we hope.
Oh shoot, we have to do the ending part.
You have to do that in. Can you do it in a Scottish accent?
Okay, I'll try it. Thank you so much for listening, social. How was the show? You want to hear what you think? Come have a chat at our fun human content podcast family on the IG and TikTok at Human Content Pods, or you can reach out to the team directly at howtobepatientpod.com. This is like more Australian. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm going back to my normal voice now. If you want to watch full videos, it's on my YouTube at It's Presro. New videos every week. You can also watch the videos on the Spotify, but I personally like when I'm on Spotify, I prefer the audio version. And the nice thing is on Spotify, you can alternate between those two. So if you're watching the video version on Spotify, there's like a switch. Or if you're watching the audio version, listening to the audio version, you can also switch back to watch video. Okay, thanks for listening. We're your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are me, Preston Roche, as mentioned before, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Portizo. Music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn more about our program disclaimer and ethics policy, submission verification, and licensing terms, our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production. It's Tuesday in it, mate. Let's go. Have a good one.
Right.
Righto.
Righto. We'll be back.
And Aaron's like, and you're fired. I'm canceling the entire show.
How to be patient.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.